Why are we so afraid of women who speak differently? Why do we flinch at unconventional ideas while blindly accepting the ones we've been handed? When a woman speaks a truth outside the script, she's called reckless, dangerous, delusional. But maybe the real threat isn't her. Maybe the real threat is how easily the official truth crumbles under pressure. But I believe in listening, even when it's not easy, even when I don't agree. Because truth isn't found in echo chambers. It's found in courageous conversation. It's found when we sit across from people who disrupt our certainty, and we stay open anyway. This is not a performance. This is not clickbait. This is what it means to be sovereign. Ladies and ladies, welcome, Dr. Kelly Brogan. This is Things Your Mother Never Told You. Let's begin. Kelly, it is so wonderful to have you here. I actually sometimes cannot believe these moments because I bought your books when they came out. A Mind of Your Own.
Yeah.
I felt like I was reading the pages of a book written from my heart, of somebody who I felt that feeling of like, finally, somebody gets it. So I want our listeners to have an understanding. They've heard the intro, but I want them to have an understanding through your lens. Who in the world is Kelly Brogan? We can chat GBT who Kelly Brogan is. We can do all of these things.
Do not Google me.
I find it incredible. But tell me through your lens, who are you for the listeners so that they have a context from your perspective?
Oh, well, it's amazing to hear about how receptive you were to that book, especially at the time and especially as a clinician, because that wasn't necessarily my experience of the book at the time. It feels like so many lifetimes ago. So it was in 2016 when it was kind of like a big deal to speak out about the dominant narrative with regard to depression and women's health.
Yes.
And now I feel like the landscape is so much more permissive, where you want to engage allopathic medicine, fine, do your thing. You want to, try a myriad of quote unquote alternative options, that's great too. And when I think back to what it was to put out a book with a top 5 publisher that ended up being totally blacklisted and became like a total burden for this company. I mean, they weren't anticipating that response. And of course I was, because I know, how pharma subsidized all of these platforms are. I knew I wasn't going to get on the Today Show or, Dr. Oz or whatever. And so that was really a wild ride. But when I look back over the arc, so let's say it's been almost a decade since that time of my becoming journey, the theme seems to be around some sort of gatekeeping. And there's a couple of different topics that I've stumbled on. We were talking about how I find myself in these provocative territories, probably because I enjoy the attention. I don't know. It just feels fun.
Or maybe because you're curious. Maybe
I'm
because
very
you're
curious.
a curious
Yes,
woman.
I'm a double Gemini, very curious individual. I love a lot of novelty and stimulation and diversity, and I can capacitate a lot of inputs, let's say. But so when I think about the gatekeeping, it seems to be the same framework that I've applied to like allopathic medicine, to birth and the medicalization of birth, to careerism for women, and even to egalitarian marriage, right? All of these things that I formerly believed in. And because I can be a bit spicy, I tend to have very strong opinions.
You're one of my kind.
But then I will swing the pendulum to experience the antithesis. And I've done that many times, in fact, on each of those topics. So I was conventionally trained as a pill-pushing psychiatrist, and I trained in New York City, so I was enculturated to believe that, chemical imbalances and all sorts of inborn receptor-related issues were at the root of what we see in human beings when it comes to cognitive, behavioral, or emotional dysregulation, right?
Yes.
Nothing for you to worry about, nothing for you to do. Just take your pills
pill.
and manage the problem that, unfortunately, bad genes, bad luck, maybe bad timing has led to in your life experience. So I went from believing in that so passionately that I specialized in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women. So I was one of the first 300 internationally to sign on to this burgeoning specialty that was meeting the demand of the 1 in 4 women who were encountering pregnancy or attempting to conceive while medicated. And because there is such a dearth of actual high-quality research in that population, I was trained in how to talk to women about the decision to continue their meds, to start new meds, or to discontinue them. And I medicated thousands of women over, my specialization, thinking that was the best thing for them.
Absolutely. Thinking you were actually providing relief to them on this journey.
And so
what changed?
Well, this is not uncommon. It was through my own experience, through my own personal experience with what conventional medicine has to offer that I encountered the glass ceiling. And I was diagnosed postpartum my first pregnancy with an so-called autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And I, at the time, had started to dip a toe into unconventional realms because I decided to have an unmedicated natural birth in a birthing center, even though I was not even the least bit like an earth mama, sort of I'm going to do it for the experience of my own reclamation. I mean, none of that was even relevant. I was still a dyed-in-the-wool scientism practicing.
What made you decide to do that then?
Because I was obsessed with the research. I mean, I probably spent every Saturday, I remember, for so many years, probably a decade, I would wake up and I would have a curated, probably like 200 to 300 PubMed abstracts on subjects that I was interested in that I would go through. And when I started to almost competitively research OBGYN as a psychiatrist, I was astounded at the consensus medicine that these practitioners are engaged in. And what I mean by that is that it's like very low tier research and evidence that they are predicating their common practices on. And it's just kind of because everybody's decided to do this. Episiotomy, fetal monitoring, all of these interventions, epidural even. When you look at the quality of evidence substantiating these interventions, I was quite surprised and not impressed. And again, the competitive spirit in me that says, I can decide for myself whether this is scientifically valid. That's why I had no interventions, because I wasn't satisfied with their safety. And also I was quite a control freak.
But isn't this also being an informed consumer?
Yeah, and if it takes, $200,000 of debt and 9 years of training and pedigree to become an informed consumer, that's what's led me to believe that that's not a realistic expectation for
It's
any
not,
given
and it's
patient.
also not realistic for a decade to study and read all the PubMeds, right? Because the average woman doesn't have that kind of time. And let's be honest, that kind of privilege, because if she is a single mom or low-income families, the reality of those lives, there isn't the leisure or the spaciousness to deeply dive in and comb through the research and also be able to make sense of it. It's almost as if natural birth or a woman deciding to do that is a very luxurious thing right now, because she is pushed often into this is the only option if you're giving birth. We don't even have a conversation or an idea about anything outside of this. And I speak from 10 years of experience as a birth educator. I taught natural childbirth because of my own natural births, wanting to be the woman who truly shared this with everyone, even if it changed one woman's life, because I believed so passionately in my experience of natural birth versus all the stories I was hearing from other women and what was happening. So I went on, in addition to doing the work that I do as a psychologist, I was teaching on Sunday evenings. We were living outside of Boulder. I started in Boston, and then I was teaching in Boulder as well, out of my basement.
Amazing.
For a 12-week session. The couples would come, and some of the most beautiful work of my life, and then watching the stories of these women. And it's all about that body reclamation. And I feel so strongly about this, and that's why even reading your book, A Mind of Your Own, the connection that I felt around depression, anxiety, and looking at what message is the depression and the anxiety, those symptoms, what are they trying to communicate to you? Because as a young girl, I share this in my book, when I was 10, my parents went through a divorce. And I don't think divorce causes upset as much as the way it's handled. And it was handled in a way that was very devastating and heartbreaking and very confusing, and no one to talk to about it.
Yeah.
My emotions were way too much for anyone to handle. So I was often sent to my room and called dramatic.
Wow.
As a result, I ended up all of this, at 10 years old into 11, all of the skin on my hands and my feet started peeling off. Kelly, I had headaches so bad I could barely get my head off the pillow as a young girl. Stomach aches that had me doubled over, not going to the bathroom, just tears in such excruciating pain. It eventually got so intense. I was missing such a large amount of school that my parents did decide, thankfully, to take me to Cleveland Clinic. And by the grace of the goddess, for whatever reason, I was there for 2 full days of testing, every kind of test you could possibly imagine. And at the very end, because I've read the report, at the very end, I see a psychiatrist. I have no real recollection of that particular conversation. I remember being there, but I think the whole thing was very scary to me, so some of it's blocked out. But in the report, it goes on to say that I am suffering from depression and anxiety, and he recommended a prescription, and I was 10.
Because you're the identified patient instead of an emergent phenomenon of this conflict. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And my parents, for whatever reason, said, no, we will not be doing that. And interestingly, my father has since passed, and we did not have much of a relationship at all. So I never got to hear his reasoning for it. And my mom said that it was more his decision than it was hers. But I have to tell you how thankful I am, because it was just months later, we were at a garage sale, and I got a record player. And for whatever reason, the only record that was available that was still there the day that I was purchasing for 75 cents was Lionel Richie. I proceeded.
That's all you needed.
That's all I needed. Lionel, I hope to meet him someday to tell him, I mean this with all seriousness, that music saved my life.
That's amazing.
Because I didn't even know what I was doing. I went home, put my little record on. I almost wore it down. I listened to it so much. And what started to happen, the crying and the retching and letting all of it start to move out of me over a very short period of time. The headaches dissipated, the stomach aches, the peeling of the hands. My mom soon after bought me a journal. I started writing how I was feeling. And it's not that everything got better emotionally. It's just that I had a place to put it and feel it. So I have living proof in my own life that there is another way, that if we pay attention, these symptoms are speaking to us. And I have so many women who end up, after our work together, not upon my suggestion whatsoever, but after having such tools for functioning and living, decide actively to get themselves, they wean themselves gently off of their meds and say, oh my gosh, I feel so alive now. I didn't know that I didn't have to be afraid of my big feelings. Now there's context for it. Now there's something to do with the rage and the anger or the sadness. Contextually, I can move with it and not be terrified that I need to quell it. And it sounds like that's what you were starting to come to, this realization of like, wait a minute, maybe if we lean in and listen to what these symptoms are telling us, we can more deeply connect with ourselves and get to know ourselves so much better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to paint a picture of how matrix I was. Okay, I need you to imagine that, because I came from, I was in a very psychopharmaceutically oriented training, and I don't think I heard the word soul one time in my entire training. I was not interested in trauma. I mean, there was some psychodynamics, like Freudian stuff. But for the most part, I was focused on chemistry.
Yes.
Or the illusion of, I should say.
Yes.
And so my entry point was the poor bargain of medication, right? If medication actually delivered on a promise with manageable side effects, then I wouldn't have had a 2-year wait list once I decided to specialize in helping women come off medication, right? Because what did I learn? I learned that the evidence supporting the efficacy of medication is largely manipulated, and legally so, by industry that is allowed to hide all of the inconvenient research in a locked file drawer. I also learned
How is this even possible?
because you only need 2 studies to get FDA approval, and you could do 100,000 studies, if funding
Okay, can you
allows.
repeat that? Because I think that's a really important piece for our listeners
it's like
to understand.
if you are trying to get heads on a quarter and you flip it as many times as you want until you get the 2 heads, that doesn't mean that the quarter had 2 heads on it, right? So it is part of how industry interfaces with regulatory agencies that are populated by the same leadership as industry. So it's called the revolving door.
Yes.
And it's just kind of the nature of where we are. And, because I'm so interested and have become so interested in victimhood, right? So victim-related psychology, I opted out at some point in the finger-pointing, blaming, the upset around this because industry never said that they're here to help. It's a business.
Right.
You don't like what they're selling, don't buy it.
Absolutely.
But don't expect them to go out of their way to undercut their own
Interests.
profits. They're going to play the game, right? So another thing that I learned a lot about is the research that seemingly does support efficacy in these medications. And, we can talk about antidepressants, but it applies to anti-anxiety meds, to so-called mood stabilizers, even so-called antipsychotics. It's the same story. Stimulants, that the active placebo effect, what's called the active placebo effect, which is mostly researched by this guy, Irving Kirsch.
Okay.
And I'm standing on the shoulders of giants because all of this research was done when I became interested in it. It was already decades in the works. And all I had to do was collect it into some coherent form and reference a couple hundred studies in my curation so that woman who's not in a position to sit down with PubMed every Saturday can flip through a book or listen to an Audible or take it out of her library and have a better sense of the landscape. So the active placebo effect essentially is in many ways the result of direct-to-consumer advertising, right? So we're one of just a handful of countries that allows for companies to talk to you about your biology, to talk about the mechanisms of these medications as far as they understand them. And so when you take a medication and you've been literally, subliminally, and overtly conditioned around what the medication's going to do. So it has dry mouth side effect, constipation side effect, maybe you get a headache. But then it's going to correct your serotonin levels, right? Then you take in a trial a medication that is a sugar pill with none of those side effects, or you take an actual medication that has those side effects and you start to experience the side effects. What happens? The inner pharmacopoeia is basically unlocked so that the placebo effect induced by the side effects because you're saying oh, I'm in the treatment arm. This is so exciting. I'm going to feel better. My chemistry is going to be corrected. It starts to unfold. And so the research that suggests not only the power of the placebo effect, but also the nocebo effect. So you go off your meds and you have the belief that you're going to be unwell, you will statistically significantly develop the symptoms you are afraid of developing, even if you continue your meds, but you've been told that you discontinue them. I mean, it's wild. So once I started to look at the efficacy, I was pretty convinced that these are no more effective than placebo. So then I became interested in the side effects. Okay, well, what are they? That's where, the nightmarish aspects of my, truther career began to surface because I started to be contacted by people who had these seemingly uncommon, but very random, it's like a Russian roulette. Side effects of impulsive violence towards others. I was contacted by a man who murdered his own son when he was a few weeks on Paxil. Okay. By a woman whose husband hanged himself in the garage, had never felt suicidal a day in his life after starting Zoloft, right? So this kind of, it's typically referred to as akathisia-induced violence. So it's either to self or others, is certainly not something that I was trained in. And if I was trained in anything, it was to suggest that this was already brewing, right?
Oh, right. This had nothing to do with
Maybe
it
you've
directly
heard
with
this.
the
Yeah.
medication.
And the same with even emergent diagnoses of bipolar disorder, that you start on an antidepressant, and according to a Yale study, 1 in 23 people then get a diagnosis of bipolar. Well, what happened? Did the medication induce that? Or was it underlying? Well, the research suggests the former, right? That this is iatrogenic, that this is doctor-induced harm. So I came to this concept that you put forth, that your symptoms are messages that are from you to you about you. You can, ignore them. You can cut the wire to the alarm and imagine that the fire is not burning. You can do whatever you want, but they're you. They're all you, right?
Yes.
So I came to that concept over the bridge of now what, right? If not these meds, how do I deal with this? Because
Was there a part of you ever in the darkest of the hours, alone by yourself with all of this information, was there ever a part of you that wished you hadn't peaked?
Oh, yes. Oh, until quite recently, actually.
Say more about that.
Yeah, because I'm a mother. And as I started to go down these rabbit holes, so that rabbit hole led to many other pharmaceutical rabbit holes, which led to many other chemical industry rabbit holes, and food and agricultural rabbit holes, then financial rabbit holes and educational rabbit holes. And
It's endless.
Yeah.
I've been in that pit, and
I
it is endless.
certainly had those moments. I would say the peak was after my mentor, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, died in 2015, where I felt the kind of compelled surrender that can only be described as like a nihilistic release of attachment to this life. Like I really just felt like, I don't know if I'm interested. And I also felt like, look at this world that I brought my kids into. Like this is a dumpster fire. And somehow the alchemy of that grief led me to shift from fixing, right? So this, I actually speak a lot about the shadow of activism because I've embodied all of it.
I have so much to say. I want to talk to you about this in a bit, so let's make sure we come back to this. Because
there's a lot to say.
Yes.
It's been very humbling to acknowledge, a lot of the victim consciousness that I was embodying almost in a villainous energy as an activist. Like I was out for blood, and I needed these
on
victims.
behalf, was it on
behalf of the victims, right? The anonymous victims. Meanwhile, I'm neglecting my kids at home, right? Because I'm fighting for the anonymous child out there and imagining that without me, the world would be in peril. I mean, it's like the grandiosity is like quite extraordinary, but most activists that I've ever partnered with or collaborated with, our home lives are just an absolute mess. Our relationships are in disarray, and we have, I call it now the erotic caress of the enemy. We have an obsession with the enemy. We think about it. We wake up, strategizing. And I was so much in that energy of fixing, which is another way of saying fighting with reality, right? And so my mentor's death really, it shifted me out of that. And I said, you know what? YOLO. Life is short. What actually feels good? I scanned my entire life and practice and, career. And what I found felt good was, the redemption stories that I was hearing, the experience of from the wound to the light, like this. Here, I didn't have the language at the time, but like the heroine's journey, the hero's journey. And not that it could usually unfold over a year or two, but that I started to witness these archetypal aspects of the journey in the women who were coming off meds in my practice. And of course, then I had my own experience in my personal life that was very archetypal, this awakening experience, if you will. And so I started to focus on these outcomes. I started publishing them. I started a randomized clinical trial. I published case series. I published case reports. And in some cases, like I have a a report on a woman who resolved Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroidism, without surgery or radiation. And it was, as far as I can tell, the first one in medical history, that I just popped in there. Yes. Not because, of course, it's the first time it's ever happened, but because nobody, had the opportunity or wherewithal or, whatever ingredients were necessary to afford me publication in a peer-reviewed journal of such material. And my mentor, I feel, really was like a guiding hand from beyond in a lot of these. And so that allowed me to shift into a creative dimension of my life that just keeps, I guess, blossoming.
Yes.
And that is where this phrase that I've worked with, which is that suffering ends where meaning begins. That's where the meaning really started to take root, because I didn't come at this work with any sort of spirit. I was an atheist. I was a hardcore atheist. And the connection to a grand design, the experience of rich fulfillment through an orientation of embrace around adversity. I mean, that all, it's almost like it was created anew through me or something, because I was so unexposed to pre-existing material. We never studied Jung in my, residency ever. I don't even know if I heard his name.
Yes.
Until it was post-education, post-training days of my life. So, yeah,
But it was a path that you were definitely meant to walk, because you are helping so many women see a different way. And it's only a few of those cases that you have to see with your own eyes and hear the suffering of to believe. And that is why, as a woman who runs really deeply, and like a core of me has such an activist spirit, because I want to awaken everyone and tell everyone the news and help them see what's really happening. And for a long time, that, I think, was not having the effect I'd hoped it would have, because it's easy to also disregard the really intense woman who's like, you've got to read this, you need to understand. And what I decided to do with that is I am not here, nor do I have the capacity or the hours in a day or the energy in my life to save the world, nor could I ever possibly begin to. But what I do know how to do is I do know how to teach women how to save themselves.
Yes.
And their families. Yeah. I know how to help them learn the way to best put out that fire and build something different. And so when women who have come to me in wheelchairs no longer are in wheelchairs, when women who have come to me with arthritis that aches so badly that they can barely walk across the room without moaning, when that changes for them and all that inflammation starts to go away, and women who've had chronic, unbelievable migraines, when I've worked with enough of these women all around the world, the evidence is there.
Yeah.
In their stories and their lived experiences. I don't need anything else to propel me to stay on this path, because the evidence is in every single story about these women. And so it is why I continue delivering and doing what I'm doing at the capacity that I'm doing it, with the depth and breadth that I'm doing it, because this is so beautiful to watch. To watch a woman rise in her life and change things for her family, relationships, health, and the way they reimagine everything. There is nothing quite as beautiful as that. And I've only been doing it through that energy for about 3 years.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I had my torch and I was running. And I'm like, ah! And now I still have the torch to show the way, but I'm standing.
Totally.
And women can choose to walk.
Yeah, I couldn't relate more. And that's exactly where I have arrived, is that, it's an inside job. And the relocation of your locus of power internally, right? To move from this, it's almost like you can feel it energetically. If I ask you to position your energy in the balcony of your body, right? Like almost in your eyeballs. This vigilance, this scanning, it's like a lighthouse that's constantly assessing what needs to be fixed. And we're quite attuned as women to doing that job quite well. Our trauma informs that externalized focus and the powers of observation and study that we honed, most of us as children, trying to survive, emotionally immature parents and the shrapnel of all sorts of lineage level, damage. But to relocate that in your back body, in your spine, to soften the front of your face, to allow your gaze to originate from the back of your head, something happens in your entire body that is consistent with magnetism, right? It's consistent with a kind of soft power that doesn't need to lift a finger to influence. And this shift, from child to adult, if we want to look at it maturationally, is something that I arrived at only through, again, seeing the bloody battlefields of futility in the activist space, and to really recognize, wow, I am fueling the machine, right? I am perpetuating exactly that which I purport to resolve because of the consciousness of the victim, right? And if I am in blaming and finger pointing, if I am in rejection, if I am in my villainy rescuing this victim, I'm a part of that consciousness versus a kind of maturational shift into whatever you want to call it, greater consciousness, sovereignty, that says, yes to what was, what is, what's here, and then retains all of that power. When you think about what it is to even get a shitty email and craft your Rhetoric, because I love doing this. I mean, I can write a slice and dice email in 90 seconds that you won't forget. And it's the New Yorker, right? It's the New Yorker.
Yes.
And you get the email, and for me to pen the rebuttal, for so many decades of my life, I wouldn't even be aware that I had any feelings, truly, literally any at all. Fear of rejection, feeling of betrayal, whatever it was that was invoked.
Right.
I wouldn't feel any of it because I would, flight into action, write the email, and then I'm in this erotic dance. My literal vital force energy is out there in this person's psychology and their behavior, trying to mind read. And that means that I don't get that energy, as you well know, for my own creative capacity, and to remain in the seat of my body, observing and feeling and being guided intuitively, right? So
absolutely,
that recognition that a woman's self-focus, that her self-care, and of course what that means is a whole other conversation, right?
Yeah, that's been marketed as well, right?
Yeah,
Self-care
exactly. But that this movement from outside focus to inside is really all that's required, and that you, as you well know, you will witness shifts in your relationships, your mothering, your marriage, and your lived experience. So I used to live as a drama addict, I will say. I used to live and breathe chaos. I mean, just constant conflict.
Did you grow up with chaos so that it felt natural to you?
Familiar and exciting.
Yes.
Of course, I wouldn't have
It felt
acknowledged
passionate.
that. Yeah.
Right? Even in the conflict, I see that with a lot of couples, that there is something beautifully passionate in their mind about that polarity and that engagement. And is he going to come back in the room, or do I have to go in there? How much longer should I wait? I think I hear him. It is. Yeah. It's very theatrical, right?
Exactly.
And what I have to help women work through in stabilizing the nervous system when the relationship is stable and healthy, and everything they actually claim they dreamed of, is setting that new energy to recognize that this actually gets to be so erotic and beautiful.
It's the hardest.
It's
what
very
you're describing
tricky.
Is the hardest nervous system level work I've done in my life over the past 3 years. Because people are like, oh, you're so courageous, like you speak truth to power, all this. That is not courage. That was a compulsion. I couldn't not do that. I didn't wake up and say, ooh, should I say the thing? No, I had to say the thing. But to get soft and slow and quiet, and to allow my life to be so stable to the point of almost boring, has been a titration into a kind of embrace of harmony and peace that sometimes can feel like a silent scream. I mean, just to be with myself and everything that I that bubbles up when I can't remember the last time I had a conflict. Like I literally can't remember.
I love you having this as an example for yourself, because I think it is really important. And I've been on the exact same journey as it relates in particular to my marriage, where when the last decade, there hasn't been drama. We're going to be almost 29 years married now. And I thrived in it. And it felt like connection. It felt like passion. It felt like I was the misunderstood woman. I was so complicated. I was so deep. How would he ever understand me? How would he ever fulfill me? Maybe this marriage is all wrong. I filed for divorce 18 years ago. All the theatrics, right? At the time, I did not believe it was that. I believed it was actually the things I was claiming it to be. Now that we are in this incredibly stable place, for the first year or two, I made it mean it was boring.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like instigating any kind of drama between us, but I started deciding, well, maybe we should do this or maybe that, or all of this craziness. And I thought, Amanda, what would it look like to learn how to just be in peace and predictability? And that, you are exactly right, is some of the hardest work to do. Because it is not something, I didn't grow up with that level of stability. I didn't grow up with that level of reliance, dependability, and then to make beauty in that place. In some of the simplest of routines.
Yeah.
The walk in the neighborhood with the puppy, right? And like this simple, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? It being a lot less flashy and dramatic has been a really interesting journey for me.
I love that you pointed that out, because the emergent phenomenon of sensual pleasure and beauty is eclipsed by the drama and the addiction to chaos and stimulus and newness and the seeking energy, especially in a lot of the new age escapades that I was a part of. There's such an avoidance. I mean, I went from activism related avoidance of my own innerscape to a lot of new age avoidance, meaning that I was like constantly seeking, constantly trying to learn how to experience okayness and this slowing down that you're describing. I mean, you literally can taste a mango and it can be like the most ecstatic experience of your
like
day.
the most sensual in the kitchen alone. I'm like, how is this even possible? And I like to cut it so that I can like drag my teeth through it, and it's dripping down my chin. I'm like, I'm not sure if it gets more erotic on a Thursday afternoon.
I know.
Or going out and checking on my orchids in my backyard,
it's
right?
so
or getting lost in like the furriness of my puppy's like little belly.
Don't get me started with
It's
pets
like,
and kitties. Yeah.
Oh, it's just so
Totally.
beautiful. But I want to thank you for going there, because I want to ask, there's so many things I want to talk about, but I want to touch briefly, if we can, on this ideology around spirituality as another vector where people are getting lost. I have so much openness around many different modalities, and everybody finds their way and everybody's figuring it out. We're all on our paths, as you and I have shared in our own personal journeys. But what I think I have found a lot of is I really have gone down some rabbit holes of really understanding some spiritual leaders, which I'm not going to name because that's not what this is about. But I find, and I have lots of clients who end up, by the time they get to me, have worked through most of those spiritual leaders at some point on their journey. The level of wounding in some of the leadership is disturbing.
Sure, they wouldn't be otherwise.
deeply disturbing, the level of wounding that these people are leading from, and the dysregulation that it's causing in so many people is alarming to me. And I think it's because it's not a regulated space. There are so many things that I'm hearing about that just are terrifying and blowing my mind. A lot of it coming from the masculine leaders, with a lot of suggestion that part of what this woman needs to really come into full alignment with her feminine is dark. Let's just say that. It's very dark, and often is sexually forward-facing. And I have a real issue with and the endless, and I'm not opposed to this either, but the endless ayahuasca journeys, the endless mushroom trips, the constant, I feel like it's moving further away from yourself. And I know that people are trying to say it brings you closer. I'm just not convinced. I'm not convinced, because what you and I are talking about, this sitting in my kitchen and having the mango, or having a conversation with my husband about the logistics of the rest of the week, That's not sexy or fancy, but there's something really powerful in being able to stay in that kind of place and then make love to that same person after almost 30 years together. So I am curious, your thoughts, your feelings, because I've not deeply ventured into that world myself. It doesn't turn me on. It doesn't interest me. I'm a fairly grounded person, and I'm not saying people who go into spiritual worlds are not grounded, but I'm not buying it that we're going to do 2 ayahuasca ceremonies every month and call this like the most incredible work. Like, I'm really interested in learning how to be here in this world that you and I are here in right now and have the really vulnerable, hard conversations and talk to my partner about something that's really upsetting to me or somewhere where that I'm feeling scared and lonely without any desire to do it from an altered state. And I understand that you can reach more truth when ego is removed, and I understand all of the arguments that people bring. And I'm not saying that there's no place for it. I really want people to hear me. I'm not saying that at all. I just feel like it's another place where people hide. It's just another place where there's almost an addiction to that.
Yeah, and as, again, someone who's come from the world of rejecting what is, which I would say pharma is that. I mean, it's not a value assessment. It's not even relevant to assign some sort of moral sort of scale to it. Because if what you are experiencing is unwanted and you take something that quite literally could have the word anti in it, antiemetic, antihypertensive, antihistamine, antidepressant, it literally is telling you you are warring with what is, then that makes sense for many people. It made sense for me where I was in my consciousness. It may make sense to me in 2 months. I don't know.
Absolutely.
But it's a signature of consciousness. I like to think of it as a maturational spectrum because I think that there are many ways we are enculturated around triangulation as children. And so it makes sense to look to the rescuer outside. And, it's like the sinner and the savior is outside just because the power when you're a little kid feels like it's out there, right? So that makes sense. And we don't have initiation rituals. So what is it that would bring us from this immature consciousness to an adult consciousness where we recognize our world creative capacity, right? So to me, the people who find themselves, right? Like I used to think like, I have to save all the women from that. And now I feel like if you are a match to that, it's not my business. It's literally not my business.
It's not.
And when you're not, there's no need to save you from it because, you said you help a lot of women. I don't think, and I've got a big mouth. I could have been like, I think quite an effective litigator. And I don't think I've ever changed anyone's mind.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many references I put in there. When somebody feels the permission to believe this small voice that was already there,
100%.
That's all that my big mouth is doing.
That is it.
So I'm not.
I always say this is just information.
Mind. Yeah.
And you get to decide what you do with this information. And it is because the way I hear women experience it is something gets unlocked inside of them when I am teaching and when I am sharing. That is an old coding, an old memory of
that was there.
Yes, that is all this work is.
Yeah.
It helps them to unlock, right? Something that it was deeply recessed that maybe there hadn't been language for before. And this work, I use the archetypes just for context for us to understand and people to play with. I operated a good part of my life in baby princess energy.
Yes.
I was this little one running around looking for someone to save me or to fix it. Or when I was angry and I was retaliating, you took my toys or whatever the energy was. And this work that I do helps women deconstruct from baby princess into these queens. And the queen energy is that ability, instead of looking up from the balcony like, where's my savior coming from? It's this ability to zoom back and see the macro and just breathe.
Yeah, relax.
And that is what transforms women's relationships, that queen archetypal energy, and what transforms their relationships with their body, even as they're on an aging journey. It's what transforms their sisterhoods and the safety between women. It's what transforms the way we experience money and all abundance in all of its forms. But it's a journey to get there. Because I don't know about you, but I did not with the most well-intentioned mother who did everything she was capable of, I did not have a lot of examples of real queenly leadership style of women in my periphery. I didn't have a mentor who was leading with this grounded energy that I was so craving and desiring. And so it wasn't until I learned about Georgia O'Keeffe and her work in the world and her way of being and reading some of what she's written, I was like, that's the closest for me I've come to a mentor that felt very grounded and like just new and created from that place and lived from that place without trying to convince anybody of anything. And that is this work that I think is so beautiful. And that's what calls in, a lot of times when I'm working with women and they're talking about their relationships with their partner, it is this idea of like, he's not reading the books, he's not changing, he's not doing the things.
Right,
and I'm like,
the external focus. Yeah.
Right. Like you just get to do what you believe to be the next right and best thing for you. And he, like you said earlier, they're paying attention. And people will choose for themselves if they want to come along in their own way. It won't look the same or not. And each way that the partner chooses is information and will, inform what happens next in that relationship. But our job as women, I think, is to do that internally and to stop trying to get everyone around us to understand, agree, change. It's like, this is my work. And whatever you all decide to do with it is yours, business.
Yeah, there's a phrase that came to me, overachieving, under-receiving women, because I have been that woman, absolutely. And there's so many women, I'm sure you hear this all the time too, that are like, I have done everything. I have, gone to the ends of the earth for this relationship, let's say. And for most of us, it's like the actual work hasn't even begun when you're making that statement, because you're in that codependent, giving to get, externalized focus of the child. And when you're really ready to give, it's, that unconditionally open heart that's supported by a really strong spine. That's maturational. That's a woman's comportment, her embodiment, her nervous system regulated. It's not available at earlier stages. And so, to answer your question about New Age and spiritual bypass, when you are ready to simply be with what's inside of you, right? And to generate the experience of safety in your own body that comes with, yes, I'm here, then you're ready. And you're not ready a moment before that. And so you will continue to match, cults, retreats, books, gurus, or whatever, who are a reflection of a certain kind of resonance, from your childhood experience. If we want to generalize, it's just the victim field. And when you are ready to exit, you exit, That's why when I have interested myself in the plight of other women's experience, it ends up being like this meta recapitulation of the problem within myself. And so I've really removed myself from even like commentary, also because I've participated in so much bypass, because I simply wasn't, I'm Kundalini yoga trained, for example. I think Kundalini yoga is extremely powerful, ancient technology, and it has done wonders for my nervous system. And every single time I looked up a meditation to do, it was because I didn't want to feel what I was feeling, right? So left nostril breathing is because you don't want to feel anxious, So this simplicity of, what we're talking about here, which is to simply, I call it entering through the upset, to simply be with yourself in those moments that you would otherwise reject your own feminine. There's not even really much of a technique. I call it self-husbanding because I'm very visual and I like to sort of imagine a thing happening, right? So if I get an upsetting email or I feel, some wire tripped inside of me, I'll imagine that spine, right? Like I'll imagine that the devoted husband is here in here, right? So like, what does a good husband do? He offers his gaze, his attention, and his unwavering presence, right? So I will offer that to myself. It literally for 4 seconds. I'll just invoke that signature. And I have a teacher who takes issue with my we sort of like joke about it, but Omar Pani, who takes issue with like my using the words masculine, I guess he's like, you don't know what a man's body feels like. Like, why are you even saying that? And he's totally right. So I'm more talking like the signature of what is this signature of the, the
It's like a container,
it's a
holding.
containment. It's self-containment. In fact, that is the exact term I use from that world, the BDSM world. So if I am offering myself this signature energy of a container, of a good husband, you could make it a good father, you could invoke deities, whatever it is, then what goes on after that? Well, what goes on after that is just tracking with the masculine gift of attention, what's happening, right? So I see you sensation there. I see you pokey feeling here. I see you like waves of heat up my neck, That's it. And within 90 seconds, it will move and shift.
Yes.
That's it. So it's not like you don't have to go to any special, lengths to learn how to be with yourself, but you have to be ready on a nervous system level to offer that. And you're just not ready until you're ready, and that's fine. Right?
Absolutely. But that's why these conversations, I think, are so important, because we are both having that lived experience of walking that path and arriving at this beautiful place where it sometimes blows my mind how available now all of it is inside of me.
Yeah.
And it really is, with learning to just be with all of the massive, and I feel deeply and intensely and wildly, and it varies many times throughout the day. Not because I'm an unstable person, but because I'm
You're a woman. Hello.
I'm a woman.
Because you're a woman.
And I'm also deeply paying attention to my experience and not bypassing anything in my life. But there's also when, like what you're talking about is, I think of it for myself as like, I feel almost like I'm metabolizing in real time. I'm holding such exquisite space for everything that's happening that it doesn't get harbored. It doesn't turn into resentment or a jealousy. It's just like, okay, I'm noticing this is what's happening. What's going on? And it's just so beautiful. I think of it for myself often as like the divine mother of a child falls down and gets hurt. Right? And she just kneels down and she sits with the child while they're crying or going through what they're going. And she kind of scoops them up and she's like there and holding them. And when they're ready, they get up and they walk away and they go play. It's like sometimes we just need to give a moment to all that we are feeling and experiencing inside of us. It's how we build that internal intimacy for ourselves. My gosh, Kelly, I could talk to you forever. I want to, and there's so many other avenues that we haven't even had a chance to explore. We might have to do another one. But one of the things I want to touch on as we're closing out that I think is kind of a fun little note here is I think we have another thread in common, which is our love for, and you have to tell me where you are on the journey, but our love for pole dancing.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking about that, actually. It's funny you should bring it up, because I was thinking about how some of the most powerful work that I've done has been, because you mentioned resentment, and I'm like a disappointment junkie. I love to feel disappointed. And it really feels good to me. And the resentment and bitterness and all of these energies that tighten a woman up, right? So you can almost like look at a woman, you look at her body, and it's just stiff and kind of tight. And so I thought about, the women, the dancers that I have worked with and been taught by over my journey, because I've loved dance since I was forever little. But when I was up in New York, I mostly did like hip hop and African. And then when I came down to Miami, I started weaving in like Latin dance. And it wasn't until 2021 that I went to my first pole dance class and had, what is, I think, a fairly typical journey, sort of like Eat, Pray, Love-ish journey, where I felt like my inner child, sort of like peeked out the curtain after my last divorce. And, she's like, is it safe to come out? And I started dancing and weaving my womanness in with, my child like nature. And I learned how to sew, and I started taking singing lessons and painting my nails and just doing all these things that I, for whatever myriad reasons, hadn't prioritized. And the experience that I had, because I chose to share my pole journey publicly, and the experience that I had of constructive criticism around
From women or men?
women, exclusively from women.
The trigger response. They were seeing something in you that probably your level of freedom and ownership and liberation and connection to your body came up against something they were feeling uncomfortable with.
What they would say was essentially like, please stop. Like, stop, right? Like, you're harming the people that you're here to help. Stay in your lane. Okay, so I'm a doctor in a white coat who's never worn a tank top on screen, let alone a bikini on a pole. I get that this was kind of like out of left field. And, you know, the many, many moments that led to my decision to put this out there were also gratified by, I cannot tell you. For every woman who says, you saved my life, you know, I'm off of meds because of you, I no longer identify as a patient because of you, whatever. I have probably 2 women who said, you inspired my pole journey. I can't tell you how much easier it is for me to receive that. Like, I could be brought to tears by a woman stopping me on the street saying, like, I started pole dancing because of you. Yeah. And I think I was, like, just bad enough, you know, that it was like, oh, I could do that. You know, I was like the perfect amount of like amateur, but also a bit audacious, right?
Yeah.
And so, but a lot of the pushback gave me the opportunity to refine my flavor of shadow work that I call wearing the villain crown, which was quite simply to make the decision at a certain point to use Instagram. I feel like I'm at the end of this arc, you know, where you know, my Instagram is essentially now just podcast clips because I don't, as a tool, I feel like I really used it good. And how did I use it? I would take every triggering comment, you know, you're embarrassing yourself. I can't believe you have daughters and you're doing this. How are you supposed to be respected as a doctor now that you've made this decision? You're a bad dancer. Like all the things, right? You have an eating disorder, whatever.
Endless.
And some of them would sting, and some of them would really induce like waves of shame. Mostly the ones that are like, you are embarrassing yourself. Like you're womaning wrong. Like what are you even doing? But then some would just like, you know, slide off my back. You know, like I don't have an eating disorder. I don't, right? So it wouldn't, it wouldn't stick. But the ones that would, I would try them on. Nobody's here, right? I wasn't talking to a therapist or anybody out there even about it. I would just quietly sit with the possibility, almost like Byron Katie-ish, right? Like, is it potentially
is it true? Yes.
Right? And every single time, I would meet the part that agreed. The manager, if you want to talk in terms of parts work, like the manager who was saying, you know, what are you doing? Please stop. It wasn't her saying that. It was me. And she's out there helping me literally to meet this part. And the part that is keeping the tension inside of me very alive, that is saying, don't do this. And another part that's saying, do this. That was for me to resolve. And if I was focused on educating the ignorant out there about what a woman's journey can look like, all of that energy would have been, you know, dispersed rather than ultimately, I mean, I wrote an entire book about it called The Reclaimed Woman, right? Like ultimately leading to a creative expression, a further creative expression. So yeah, it's been, pole dance has probably been the most powerful spiritual, you know, experience I've had for shame alchemy, for body alignment, for inspiration. I mean, I just, there's nothing that feels more inspiring to me than to watch a woman move in that way. And you know that you need to recruit as much strength as flow.
Yes.
I don't know that there's many other ways you can move your body that require like literally equal parts of both.
Yes.
And, you know, I have a pole in my house and I probably always will, even if, you know, it's just to sort of like lay my hand on it once in a while or work on a routine or whatever. But it's been extremely powerful for me spiritually.
It's so interesting. I would say that naturally aging is probably my biggest spiritual practice in a world that vilifies aging publicly. And second would be my pole dancing.
Yeah.
And And so many of my clients who could have never even fathomed that they would walk into a pole studio and give it a try are finding parts of themselves that they had never connected with before. And it's such a wild and beautiful journey. So for anyone listening, I would say, particularly if it's the right pole studio, they're not all the same experience. If you find one that is more soulful and less performative for the male gaze, something really beautiful can unravel there.
That's what I always say. Just go to one class.
It's still part of my dream that someday in future offerings, there will be included in everything that I do also a pole room space. Not ever because I'm a great pole dancer or because I'm going to teach some technique.
It doesn't matter.
It is not.
It doesn't matter.
It is all about the feeling and the expression. My original pole class when I was living out in Boulder was women of every shape, every size, every color, every ability, every age. It was so sacred. It was so phenomenal and so beautiful. And I never spent an evening there without bawling my eyes out at some point.
Isn't it amazing?
It's more than I
so
think
healing.
meets the eye. So
Totally.
for those listening, I think that we would both recommend. It's a really beautiful place to connect with yourself.
And to other women and to expand that permission field, like you said, to just be a kind of a woman that you didn't imagine you were allowed to be. At least for me, that was a huge part of what, I mean, my first teacher, Wendy, I mean, she's just all kinds of audacious that I just don't think at any other point in my journey I would have been able to handle. And, now I just can't wait for what she's up to next. Because she's just it's just so inspiring and expansive, yeah.
As we close out this conversation, I just want to circle on something you mentioned that I always find fascinating. And I think what oftentimes has people a little confused about me, and this is what I hear when women finally sign up to work with me, they're like, I've been watching you for 18 months or 2 years, and now I'm ready. And I think there's a sense of almost a bit of an enigma because, and I even have my closet is divided into 4 different archetypes. And
that's amazing.
Yes, because there's so many sides to me that I express. And I think we're not used to seeing that. So we're not sure what box to put her in.
Know. Yeah.
And that experience of those women's comments, I'm also hearing that you wear a white coat, you shouldn't be on a pole.
Yeah,
You're a mother, pick a lane. And I think, and I will claim with all of my experience now, that is part of what is harming women so profoundly, is that they're supposed to pick a lane and not diverge from it whatsoever. If you're a mother, everything you do should be operating from the energy of mother 99.9% of the time. Or if you are a physician, or if you are whatever it is, pick that lane, and everything that you speak about, the way you dress, the way you show up at every event has to be reflective of that part of your identity. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know.
That feels so suffocating. There's a little girl in me. There's a magic maker in me. There's a muse in me. There's an assassin priestess inside of me. There are all of these different energies, and I will be damned if I'm putting any of them on the sidelines or I'm hiding them secretly somewhere. They all get to come out and play. And I think that's been the most fascinating part for women to understand is that in my world, we bring all, in some, ways of psychological work, they talk about parts like you were sharing. We bring, and for me, it's in my world, it's archetypes, and we give them all a name. We bring all the archetypes to the table. And when you have a fluidity and they are able to be and dance and flow together, sometimes even in the same hour, what is possible is an aliveness that I think a lot of women haven't accessed and why they're feeling depressed and why they feel so disenfranchised. So we bring sensuality online, we bring the Divine Mother, we bring all of this beauty to a part of the journey. And that is where I see the aliveness and women feeling a sense of excitement for getting up every day they'd never felt before. So it's helping them connect with all of these beautiful parts of themselves that have been locked away somewhere and they thought had to be because they were, working at NASA now, or they had this very public profile life, or they were a mother or a wife or whatever. So yeah, I just think it's so beautiful, the opportunity.
We do this to each other, as you mentioned, though, because
we do.
I came to the conclusion after this window of time, it's probably like a year that we were just talking about with my public pole journey, where I thought, wow, what would change the world? It's not, taking away pharma indemnities or whatever I imagine. Yeah. It is women no longer imagining that they know better how another woman should woman, period. Period. What if every woman stopped commenting, unsolicited, of course, on how another woman is behaving, dressing, acting, talking. Yeah. What if we did that? I'm not even saying we should, but if we did that, the fabric of society as we know it would change. And the sisterhood, if you want to call it that, would be reconstituted within one day.
Yes.
That permission to simply belong for however it is, that you show up, that women confer to other women. I think, at least for me, I brought that expectation to my romantic partnerships where you're supposed to just love all my flavors and here's who I am and I'm on my spiritual journey. Are you coming or you're not coming? And at least for me, that resulted in 2 divorces, So the experience that I still long for on a soul level, which is, can all of me come? Other women are the ones who can give that to me. My kids are not supposed to give that to me, and in my opinion, my husband is not supposed to give that to me.
I would agree with you.
It's a different archetypal primacy where if I'm bringing the wife archetype to this man in service of the egregore that is the marriage, then all of that multiplicity of my dimensions is maybe not necessarily welcome. Same with my daughters, right? So, but in my female friendships and communities, if we can do that for each other, why are we sleeping on it? Let's just do the work of every time you imagine that you know better, you feel that superiority, how another woman is acting, wear it. Is it possible, that she's showing you something that you can work with?
I almost always.
Yeah.
Almost always. There's a gift for us to turn it inward and look at what is being activated.
Totally.
Oh, Kelly, thank you. This has been such a deep honor to have you as a guest and to have these conversations and to be so willing to go into places that oftentimes can be, I guess, uncomfortable for many. And I hope that this conversation has opened an eye and a heart to considering new possibilities of what this journey gets to look like as all humans or women specifically because of the topics that we've touched on. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.